October 5th, 2022, 9:11 a.m. Chapter 7. Here we dissect Article 1, Section 11 of the Tennessee State Constitution, where ex post facto laws are prohibited.
No law to be ex post facto. Located in the south-central part of the state, Moore County has a consolidated city-county government where its seat of government is in Lynchburg. This is the third least populous county in the state of Tennessee and the second smallest with an area of 130 square miles. The county may have been created in 1871 during the era of Reconstruction, but settlers arrived around present-day Lynchburg in 1801, and whiskey distilleries began to pop up beginning in the 1820s. Being formed from parts of Bedford, Lincoln, and Franklin counties, it was named for General William Moore. The main road or main street followed East Fork Mulberry Creek, where residents mostly lived in the west of the city, while industry grew in the east. The world-famous Tennessee whiskey is known for having its home in Lynchburg, where 15 distilleries by 1875 called Moore County in general and Lynchburg in particular their home. The 20th century coming to a close would prove the Jack Daniel's Distillery as the county's primary source of income. Being a dry county, Moore County was home to a large tannery as well, where Jackson Thomas Moore, a scholar, a gentleman, a slave, and greater man, spent his days, when he was not defending his prize-fighting title.
He was known as Black Jack on account the color of his skin and a shortened first name with a necessary distinction which recognized him as unique, a greater man. It was almost a mystery as to how slaves communicated amongst themselves, but there was always a force which wouldn't allow masters to punish slaves for anything which was unjust, and personified, that force was Jack Black. The production and consequent consumption of alcohol has always been a trivial matter within the church. So, to the backwoods, where the least amount of attention would be drawn to its production, and the most amount of privacy could be afforded for its consumption, would the distilleries be. With the effects of alcohol's consumption ranging from being in a drunken slumber to a rage that can't be reasoned with nor sated, in the backwoods of parts of Bedford, Lincoln, and Franklin counties, Lynchburg formed around the whiskey industry. It is not certain if whether Black Jack the prizefighter and greater man preceded Jack Daniel's signature brand or Jack Daniel's, but as all those who held the title were called Black Jack, Jackson Thomas Moore's name befitted his title. Working at the tannery on the outskirts of town, the Black Jack in question came in contact with almost every man in town and for miles around, where most just saw an average everyday slave, while others saw a greater man. The moral posture and ethical compass of Black Jack put him on another level than most slaves, as the envy of those in bondage encouraged assimilation to a certain extent. In the backwoods of what would become Moore County, where law enforcement was few and far between, the title of Black Jack would suppress those of the African persuasion while intimidating those European Americans to stand behind what was just or religiously correct.
With the only excuse for immoral behavior in the backwoods being intoxication, what would become known as Moore County was governed by individual achievement as a prize fighter or group unity against injustice. There was a certain behavioral balance, as in all counties where the Grand Consistory of Greater Men of Tennessee sought to establish a royal assembly. Though Moore County is now a dry county, the area wasn't as such until the American Prohibition in 1910, so making merriment with libations or drinking oneself into a drunken rage was the bipolar state of the area Moore County would encompass. Feeding merriment with alcohol and attempting to pacify rage with the same, the Black Jack of which we speak won mostly all his fights by approaching them with a sober mind. And Black Jack was not the strongest or fastest, but he had the most conviction and motivation to retain his title, because with the title came the prize money, the responsibility to lead other blacks, and the protection of those reared through breeding. So, the decision to fight was always in the challenger's best interest, and if he could only maintain his sobriety, he just might win, but most who drank alcohol felt that it provided an advantage over an opponent who had none. So, Black Jack would always anonymously provide the challenger with an offering of his signature whiskey, more of which than the challenger's party could stand.
Whites in the backwoods were welcome to challenge, but mostly never would, as they saw the sport as more of entertainment than a challenge. Their only equivalent to the title was governor, as the winner inherited the responsibility of settling discourse within the black community and preparing others in the Royal Assembly of Greater Men of Moore for battle, as it was not Moore County yet. It is still debated as to if whether or not what we know now as Moore County wasn't named after the Jackson Thomas Moore. The backwoods were a very lonely, solitary, and silent existence without the welcoming warmth of a shot of Tennessee whiskey, where any who offered were not ignored. With the availability of whiskey, it was regulated to the less fortunate and a bargaining chip for those with more economic power to control those with less.
Black Jack knew the value of whiskey distribution and used it as more of a bargaining chip than for its consumption, and European Americans, realizing this, attempted unsuccessfully to enforce an ex post facto law against him. Those in the backwoods who came to Black Jack's tannery were also offered a bottle of Tennessee whiskey, which expanded his business far past the boundaries of surrounding counties, as Black Jack's knockout punch was compared to the effect the Royal Assembly's signature Tennessee whiskey had on its consumers. As demand grew, so too did the supply, but often not adequately enough, as threats on Black Jack and other greater men at the tannery would fuel the anger of customers to the point of violence, which was channeled into prize fighting. Slaves fought slaves, and slaves who were greater men fought their like kind, as there was a labyrinth of fighters before one reached Black Jack, if they weren't intoxicated by then. That concludes this week's session, so after questions your midterm paper is due, you can begin your midterm exam and you can leave after you have finished. Thank you.